Hello and welcome back to the This is Winter Sports series supported by Protect Our Winters UK and brought to you by the Passion Stories podcast. I'm your host Emma Cole, and as always it is my absolute pleasure to bring you this wonderful podcast. Not just because it is filled to the brim with passion, but because there are some amazing stories that are going to inspire you endlessly. And I wanted to give a shout out to a really brilliant grassroots cycling event called the London Lockdown. For anyone who has been thinking about endurance cycling but hasn't got into it yet and is thinking, I want to try it, well, this is your chance. So, it's a 100-mile overnight ride around London. Sounds scary, it's not, so don't worry about it because it is super friendly and welcoming atmosphere, so it's the perfect opportunity to try something like this. There's a £10 entry donation and 100% of that goes to a local charity called Lewisham Bank of Things, which supports young people with everyday essentials. So essentially, it's a bike ride for good. It could be an amazing thing to try, and it's Friday, the 27th of March, late evening in London from Victoria Station, but don't worry about it, I have put all the details in the show notes. If there is something that you want a shout out for that you think deserves celebrating, let's do it. You can also add it to the newsletter. Make sure you go and subscribe right now because there's just a wonderful host of passionate people doing cool things, and we love to celebrate it. Which brings me to this week's guest. I am joined by Charlie Guest. Charlie is a 5-time British Slalom Champion. She is the first British woman to win an Alpine European Cup, and she's a 2-time Olympian. And she is now a sports commentator, and she will be at Milano Cortina commentating. Very, very cool. And she's going to take us through life at the highest international level to transitioning into broadcasting and commentary and stepping away from racing and how that transition was, and also her amazing highlights. So, without further ado, let's welcome to the podcast Charlie Guest. Charlie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Let's start with commentating at the Olympics, which is so exciting. What are you looking forward to the most?
I think I'm just excited to see the back scenes of the Olympic Games. I've seen it from the competing side, and so to see what goes on in the background and just be there to be able to potentially ask some of the questions that maybe everyone's thinking that nobody has thought of before. Just to get that inside scoop into a few of the athletes' minds that, as their competitor, I probably didn't get. But this time I can maybe pose the question, pontificate about it a little bit and see where we get to. I'm just so excited. I love the Olympics. I'm such a huge Olympics fan, so I can't wait for it to come around.
And that's what's so cool, is that you're coming at it from the athlete perspective because you've been there. What is going to be your setup? What are you going to be commentating on, and where will you actually be positioned?
So I'm commentating on men's and women's alpine skiing. I'll be actually back here in London, so I'll be doing everything from the TNT studio here, but we've got such a great team across the board, both out in Milano Cortina, Bormio, and then back here in London. I think it's going to feel quite seamless, and we're going to be able to, as I say, get that sort of view of what's happening in all of the villages, and just bring it all to life for everybody back home. And I think it's being part of that, creating the show and creating the sort of Olympic buzz is quite an exciting challenge.
Because you've been there, you've been to the Olympics twice. How is that experience kind of framing your commentating character, if you like?
Ooh. I guess for my commentating character, what I really try to do is lift the athletes up, if that makes sense, because give them a platform. The 1 minute that we see an athlete per run is the 1 minute you might get on TV that day, and that's so important for the career, economically, everything. And so it's to try and, where I can, weave in little facts about athletes, weave in the stories, bring them to life and their skiing to life a little bit, but then the bit I find really tricky is whilst also being able to provide that technical sort of insight for the audience. So when an athlete, and potentially one of my friends, is skiing and the time isn't going the way they want it to have to sit there and actually critique what they're doing, it's can be quite an awkward moment sometimes. And when I'm like, no, but they're a really great person, they're so lovely and they're doing such a great job and they're putting so much effort in and I love what they're so good, please believe me. But just today, something's not quite right. Maybe it's the setup, maybe it's the skiing. Like, to try and, keep that emotional and the objectivity of everything, it's quite a difficult package. But I think my ultimate goal is just to try and lift everyone in what I'm doing.
If there's your friends that are racing, do you feel those nerves for them?
Yeah. Especially when they're sat in a good position after first run or something. So I think, I'm trying to think what my most nervous one has been. And it didn't go her way. Thea Sterensen was in running for a World Championships gold medal in Saalbach, and she did slip into fourth. I remember coming down, and I'm just like willing her down. I'm like, come on. And it's hard to then think of technical things to say when I'm there as just like a viewer friend. Like, you can do this, just watch the hole that's coming up in 48's time, please. And I'm like, I'm not sure how good of commentary production I'm putting on at that point sometimes, but I'm like, I think the emotion does come through, and I have had that into my DMs from a few people that, it sounds like you're having a heart attack today. I'm like, yeah, it's probably because I am. Probably because I know how difficult this is today for the athletes, and it is tricky and they can do it. But yeah, so it's been a fun journey to the other side, yeah.
And how do you keep your emotions in check? Because it must be so difficult. Or do you just kind of let the words and I guess what's happening, the action, kind of, let it all flow and see what happens? To
be honest, I think I just let it flow. Because another thing I always want to be is authentic in anything I'm producing, or from emails, Instagram, right through to commentary. I always want to make sure I'm putting the real me out there, and really, I guess, how I'm seeing things. I suppose what I think, there are some things you've got to hold back, obviously. You can't just chuck everything out there like in any part of life. But with the emotions, I think it almost adds to a broadcast if I am invested, if I'm really having fun watching, and me and the lead commentator, whoever that might be on that day, if we can present that, then I think it's more engaging for the audience to sort of get behind and watch as well.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously you have been on the other side. You have an incredible career, and 5-time British Slalom champ, first British woman to win an Alpine European Cup. This is so cool. When you look back now, what stands out the most from your racing career?
Oh, there's two main things that stand out to me. Number one is, like, I had this period of, say, 2014 through till 2019, 2020 of having some really bad back problems. And I look back now and I'm like, I don't know how I got up every day and like pushed through all of those hoops, all of those hurdles, struggles, injury cycles, etc. to keep going. And I'm always just so glad that within me there was that resolve to do it, and I had that grit and determination to just keep going every single day. And then I guess the second thing is that after my entire career, the thing I'm most proud of is my first European Cup win. It's not a top 50, like a top 15 in World Cup was really cool. Getting in top 30 in World Cup was really, really cool. Going to Olympics was unbelievable. And as I said, I'm a huge Olympics fan, and representing Team GB was a huge, huge honour. But the first European Cup win was something that came off the back of all of this injury cycle that I talked about. I'd sort of had a switch in my mentality. I'd grown into who I was. I was like, right, this is me. These are my values. This is who I am. This is what I stand for. Let's go ski racing. And out of nowhere, like, the win came. And then from that followed on like an incredible 5-year period. And that for me was just such a switching moment in my career that it was like, I think if you'd have told me when I was a kid or like 18 years old, the proudest moment of your career is going to be a Europe Cup win, I'd have been like, jog on. All right, whatever. But now looking back at what it means and what it sort of represents in the timeline, it was just such a monumental moment, and I'm so proud of it that it really stands out.
And you mentioned those back injuries and the injury cycle. What happened? What were your actual injuries that you had to go through?
So when I was 20... I was up in Sweden preparing for the first European Cup races of that season in giant slalom, and it was the day before the races. We're on the sort of race hill, and I was like, right, this is it. Let's give it a first run. I made a pretty regular error. I went over my inside ski a little bit, and ended up hurtling off the side of the piste into the forest and landed on a rock on my back next to the piste. Luckily I was wearing back protector and stuff because it was literally like the third kind of time for GS training that I'd actually worn it. Anyway, I thought I'd maybe broken a few ribs. I had a sort of 8-hour ambulance ride to hospital, got switched ambulances at the side of the road because it was too snowy for a helicopter to come in. So like one ambulance couldn't go too far away from its zone. So I got switched side of the road, snowing. I'm like on painkillers.
Okay.
That was, having a good time probably. Got to hospital and I remember them cutting me out of my thermals, my cat suit and everything because like I was strapped down on a board. However many hours later they come through like, your ribs are fine, but you've broken 4 vertebrae, you broke your back. And I was like, excuse me? My first senior world championships I'd qualified for was 11 weeks out from that. And at that point in time, I'd become this athlete that was be more, do more, and I'll be better. And I could never understand how people took time out and still had the motivation to come back. So I was like, everyone else has had so much more extra training time on you. Like, I was really like moving through the gears in terms of world ranking at that point. So I was like, this is the way forward. This is just how it's done. You need time. And so it was quite a shock to the system to suddenly be like, now I'm the one that's got to take some time out. Yeah, did so. It wasn't very long. It was honestly, in hindsight, way too short. It was only 7 weeks out, made the world championships, made some decent results around that. But then a couple of months later, I was in a whole world of pain. I had disc issues, like nervy pains down my legs. And then for the next sort of 4 years, I would honestly build up to be really strong in the gym, strong skiing, and then something would happen and I would just completely break down. And that happened time after time after time. Like we're talking in sort of 4-month cycles. I barely made it through a season okay. And that took quite a mental toll.
I mean, that sounds absolutely heartbreaking. As an athlete, as that is, your career and your favourite thing to do.
Yeah.
How did you then develop a strong mindset from all of that?
Yeah, well, I think I took quite a beating psychologically, I would say, through that 5 years. And that's still, honestly, like, I look back at it and I really can't believe that I got up every day. But I think it was just the goal of, I want to be the best in the world at this. I want to give this shot. I want to be on World Cup. I want to be on a podium. I want to be an Olympian. I want to be at the Olympic. I want to win stuff in skiing because again that was my whole world. And actually after my first Olympics, I'd had a great summer. That 2018 summer, I'd made some great results again. I was like, finally, things are back on track. We're good to go. And then my body in October completely broke down. My personal life was a mess. The sort of coaching environment team I was in wasn't great. And I remember I was sat in Austria at some point in late October, early November, trying to do a return to snow on my own. My coach was away at a race with another athlete. It wasn't working for me. And I was like moping about, and the house parent from one of the academies I'd been staying with was like, look, I'm taking a bunch of kids to the airport today for an Edinburgh flight. Do you want to get on that plane, maybe go home? Like, maybe it would be nice. And I was like, actually, yeah, do you know what? That's what I'm doing. I'm going home. I'm done. I'm finished. I texted my coach. I was like, I'm going home. The car is in whichever number space it was at Munich airport. The keys are in the locker. I've paid for it for 2 months. See ya. I'm finished. It wasn't until GB Snow Sports phoned me up a couple of weeks later. I'm like, oh, we need another girl for the team event, actually at World Championships. Like, if we could sort of rehab down in London, like, would that work for you? And I'm like, yeah, fine, whatever. Like, I'll go do the rehab. At least then my back will be fixed by the time I then crack on with my normal life. Like, after this season's finished, then after it, I've done what I need to do, I'll finish this season, fix my back, and then I'm done. And I'd applied to go to uni. I'd got in to go and study physio, appropriately. And as far as I was concerned, I was just going to go make the most of the rehab. Great. But I walked in there and to this rehab clinic in London. The first day, the physio in there saw me. She was like, look, we're not even going to talk about your back. Like, how are you? And I completely broke down in tears. And I was like, I'm really not okay. And she's like, okay, how's your social life? I'm like, not good. Because like I put everything into skiing. I hadn't invested in anything else really. How are you eating? I was like, probably not that great at the moment, to be fair. Like, how are you sleeping? Really, not really at all. And she's like, okay, let's just like start talking about a few of these elements. And bit by bit, it was only honestly, again, over a 3-week period, we sort of built things back up. I worked with a strength coach back in that gym who just threw everything at me and let me do everything I wanted to do, because for so long with injuries I'd had my program sort of adapted, reduced, like, oh, don't do back squat, don't do deadlift, blah, blah, blah. To sort of, I guess, keep me in a bit of a cocoon, but without realizing it, it was then completely limiting my self-identity as well, because I couldn't do any of the things that I thought, oh, that's what makes me strong, or what everyone else was doing, essentially. And yeah, went home for Christmas, spent time with my friends, family. I was like, cool, I feel good, I feel strong, I feel up here. I've got a team like behind me that's backing me. Went back out for the season, got a top 30 at World Champs, got then a second place at Europa Cup in Jasna, just behind Petra Vlhova, who'd just won World Champs, and then won Europa Cup. And I was like, oh, okay, what on earth has just happened? Considering I like retired in October, it's now March, and I've just been the first British person to podium and then win, or a British woman to podium and win at an Alpine European Cup. What? And I think it genuinely is because I could stand in the start gate for the first time and be like, whatever happens down here today, I'm still a great person. I've still got stuff going on. I'm still going to uni. Like, I've got a whole world ahead of me that is not dependent on what happens on this 150-second slalom course, where literally there's 50 chances for me to mess up around all of these turns that I also have to risk to be fast. And it just allowed me to ski with that sense of freedom, fun, and joy that I guess I started skiing with when I was a kid, that had got lost along the way in the pressures of the injuries, wanting results, wanting titles, wanting to win, wanting to always be somewhere. And I could just focus on like, okay, cool, well, it's quite fun that I'm here. Let's just give this a go. And honestly, that's a mindset that really helped me excel through the rest of my career, because all of a sudden, whatever happened on the race course didn't impact who I was and the person I was. So it was quite a revelation for me.
Those 3 weeks sound incredibly formative.
Yeah, hugely. And I was, 24 turning 25 over that time. And I think it was honestly just such a pivotal moment in how I, like, almost my mind just opened up this whole new, like, dimension of, oh, right, wow, okay, yeah, like, if I've got the people in my corner, I can still enjoy myself. I still have like, and I guess that's when people say you've got to work out what your values are and that just helped me then prioritize and put myself in amongst those values. And from then on out, decision making was easier, skiing was easier, training was easier, everything was just so much easier, and therefore had less pressure on it, less stress, and allowed me to excel.
And how did that mindset then help you when the moment came to actually retire?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually. Basically, I don't know if that did it come into it did come into it. I mean, it made it easy for me because I still decided to go to uni after that season. I didn't go to do physio because I was like, well, I'm going to keep skiing because now the results, I figured something out. It's actually going
actually
well.
Quite good.
I had then backing from the federation to get a team around me that worked with me rather than and I knew had my back and helped me push me forward. So I was like, yeah, I'll keep going. But there's clearly something that's been unlocked here in having this sort of parallel life that is just Charlie and it's not skiing related. So I went to study psychology, and so I ran that degree alongside skiing all the way through until I retired, and then graduated July 25, so after I'd retired. And that was so helpful because I knew there was still something waiting for me, so I didn't feel pressured to ever stay in the sport past when it was fun. And for me, the moment came and I was sat in a hotel room, in January 2024? And I was like, right, hold on for just 2 more years. It's only 2 more years, and then you can retire. Because it would have been after the Milano Cortina games. And I was like, obviously, 2026 games. So in Europe, it'll be so much fun. I want to be part of that. And I was sat there and I was like, hold on. I was like, or that doesn't sound like the right way to be thinking about another 2 years of your life and then 2 years of the sport that you love. And it doesn't sound like the way that you're going to be successful is just by holding on to do something. And I was like, oh, I think this is it. And as soon as I'd made that decision, my results at that point hadn't been going well. My skiing hadn't been going well. I was quite lonely. I was the only woman left on the GB World Cup team. And so it was like, well, yeah, I think this is it. And the weight lifted, because then for the rest of that season, it was, okay, this is actually the last time you're going to do any of this stuff. Enjoy it for what it is, that it is the last time. I didn't actually tell any of my coaches or anything like that. There was a couple of friends that knew, and my partner and parents knew, but that was it. Because I was like, I still want to give everything 100%. I don't want anyone else's focus to drop because I'm stopping. I also, one of the things that stuck with me is I had a coach back in, well, he was head coach when I joined British team back in 2011, 2012. I remember him coming to the gym one day with me and he was like, Charlie, the easy option is probably always the wrong one. And I was sat there and it was like, oh, actually the more difficult decision to make right now is actually to say, do you know what, I'm walking away when the Olympics is 2 years away, and there's a high chance that I'll still make the qualification standard. There's a high chance I'll go, but I don't think it's the right path for me to keep on travelling down. And it was really hard to actually admit that. And I was like, that's actually the harder thing to do, is say I'm walking away rather than just keep on doing what I'm doing for another couple of years. So those were the two things that played into that retirement choice.
And on the retirement, did you imagine that you would be, still have a foot in the sport commentating on it? Or did you just think what will be, will be?
I think it was a bit what will be, and then the commentating, being part of the broadcast team, was a bit of a pipe dream. It wasn't something that I'd ever envisaged myself completely doing, but I tried it out for 2 days when I'd dislocated my collarbone back in 2023 season. I did 2 days on Cronplatz GS, women's GS, and I had a good time and I enjoyed it and I got some really good feedback. But I was like, oh, that was nice to get the opportunity to do that. I remember my agent saying, well, why don't we try the commentary thing and just see where it goes? And I was like, I mean, yeah, okay. I mean, I felt like, it felt quite saturated. Like, is there even going to be space? Am I going to be any good? Will anyone want me? I don't know. I was like, but that would be really cool. And then last season, it was 2 days before Levy World Cup Slalom, TNT Discovery Plus called me up and they were like, we need a technical expert on the women for Saturday. This was Thursday. Would you do it? And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. Yeah, sure. Yeah, cool. I hadn't planned on watching any World Cup actually this season because I just retired and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. It might be nice, as you say, to just say no, step away, do something new. And honestly loved it. And then the dates kind of kept coming into my inbox quite last minute, but I was like, yeah, I mean, I was at uni, so I was like, I can actually be flexible, that's fine. And then it turned into doing like 30 days last season, and then come this year again I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get the Olympics, and it came in through my inbox. I was like, oh yeah, love to, obviously I'll be there. I'll be watching anyway, so I was like, that's fine. Yeah, and it's just been one of those really lovely things that's happened really by accident, and it's that door closing, door opening sort of metaphor. Like, it feels so right and it feels quite natural for me to do it. And then I realised that I'd actually probably been commentating along in my own head every time I'd been watching ski racing anyway, and that might have been why it has started to come easy, because I'd always been sat there, no matter who it was that I was watching, looking and critiquing or praising what was happening within my internal narrative, I think, without even realising. And probably because a lot of that time was spent watching ski racing on Austrian TV with not fluent German skills.
I've watched quite a few races where you're commentating and you make it so easy to understand whilst also including so much information very quickly, but it doesn't come across like an overload, if that makes sense.
Very kind of you, thank you.
It's awesome. How do you, choose what you say versus what the viewer sees?
I don't know, to be honest with you. As I say, I kind of just go with the flow, and it'll be what it'll be. And I think just sticking with those principles of, I'm here to elevate the athletes, elevate the race and what's happening to make it a better show for them and for the viewer at home, are kind of the guiding principles. And then whatever comes out, comes out. There have been some times when I've caught myself saying, I think I said squeaky bum time one time. I was like, that's not cool. It's just such a British thing to say. I was like, that might not be the most professional, but what comes out.
Squeaky bum time.
Squeaky bum time. As in, like, is that a Scottish thing to say? To mean like you're getting yourself in a little bit of a difficult situation. I envisage it as if somebody's like squeezing through a gap and you're like, your bum's a bit squeaky. I actually don't even know if that's the origin of the saying, but squeaky bum time, I think it means it's like it's coming down to the wire. It's like it's starting to get a little bit stressy. Yeah, it's squeaky bum time. Like, I need to avoid saying that on live TV.
No, please do, because we will all know exactly what you're talking about.
There's someone squeezing and getting a little, being like, oh god.
I think that is brilliant. And I mean, Charlie, you've had an incredible career, and now you're in the commentating scene. It's fantastic. You've obviously seen a lot happen as well in the Alpine industry. What has evolved since you started racing to now where you are commentating?
What has evolved? Number one, the standard of young racer coming through is so much higher than when I did. The level that everyone is skiing to. I think that's obviously how sport keeps pushing on. But I'm now also a coach for Sandown Park Ski Club, sort of down here in the south, and I went out to a children's race with them just after Christmas, and I was watching some of the minis ski. That minis is like under 10 and under 12s, and I was like, I don't think I learned to carve like that until I was at least 14, 15. I was like, some of the power these kids, honestly, these 10-year-olds are putting down through the ski and making it turn is unbelievable. So everybody's skiing level, and from a British context, I would say, and probably European too, has really pushed up. And that was that stark reminder to me as watching the kids. And then a huge thing has been sports science and what goes into the athletes behind the scenes, I suppose. You know, if I'm looking at it as a female athlete, you've got female health science that's going in, and finally all of that, you know, that females are different inherently, physiologically, than male athletes. That's something that I think I could have benefited from having a little bit more knowledge on as a teenager. And, you know, like even the physio I worked with latterly, Abby Oko, she's now lead physio Sale Sharks rugby team, and she's doing huge like female health projects within women's sport, within rugby, and it's such a huge topic now, and it was never spoken about when I was younger, and you know, how to train differently, and we're just treated, I guess, as smaller, slower, weaker guys, and I always wonder what we could have unlocked maybe if we'd perhaps been trained or programmed in a slightly different way. But on top of that, it's just then all the physio and sports medicine that goes into athletes, and then we can see athletes like Dave Riding. He is an absolutely exceptional case. 40 almost, or if not 40. Sorry, Dave. No, he's going to be 40 this year, isn't he? And was somewhere in that age range. Still up there strength-wise, up there physically, mentally, and still putting in top 15 results on World Cup. And you're like, for a slalom athlete where the tempo is so high, where the energy is so high, and it's such a quick, sharp reaction sport, it's like, it's unbelievable that's happened. They got Lindsey Vonn coming back in with all of her surgeries, with a knee replacement and everything. Like, I don't think that would have been possible without modern day sports medicine, science, etc. Obviously, again, she's an exceptional athlete, so obviously combines with the personalities, but they're huge evolutions within skiing and I guess sports in general.
And then when you look at sort of, I guess, some of the continual barriers, especially coming from perhaps like a non-traditional, not a massive snow sports nation, what are some of the things that you would like to see happen in the future?
This is my moment, my soapbox moment, isn't it? Again, twofold. And say again, it comes in when you look at female health. I'd love to see across skiing in general, not even just female health, just female equality and equity in general can really be pushed on, whether that's in what's being shown on TV, how it's presented, who the sponsors are, who the ski manufacturers might be involved within both men's and women's side of the sport, just to give everybody equal opportunities. You know, for example, a couple of years ago I wrote, I'd say, a pretty gutsy letter to FIS when they didn't show women's slalom and giant slalom from World Junior Championships on a YouTube stream, but they did show the guys. You know, things like that are still happening in our sport, which needs to change. And I know minimum prize money and everything is the same, but for example, Van Deer Red Bull skis are in the men's side of skiing, but not in the women's, and they've drawn quite a lot of media attention, and it's a whole other opportunity of equipment and publicity that guys have that the girls aren't afforded at the moment. And then I guess the big one at the moment, which is hard to ignore, is the small matter of climate change and our warming climate. I've seen glaciers pretty much disappear over my time ski racing. You know, we used to go to Tignes Glacier in the French Alps every October camp, and we could ski from the top of the cable car all the way down below the restaurant on a piece called Rosalind. And the Canadian team would turn up and French team would turn up and do like downhill training and speed training all the way down the piste, and now that's not a thing. Champrey, which is a big slope that comes down the middle, it's got this giant rock that comes across the bottom, which takes out quite a lot of the lane that we again used to race down and train down. And that's quite stark when you can see it in real life that those opportunities just don't exist, and that's happening on every other glacier everywhere in Europe that we ever skied on, and soon they're not going to be there. We've skied at races, Zagreb isn't on the race calendar anymore, rarely makes it's not on the calendar anymore. Kranjska Gora, the last time I raced there, it was literally just the race piece had a strip of snow, and we couldn't even warm up or do anything around about just doing your 2 race runs. And that just reduces the fun of the sport. I think it reduces the reach that the sport has. It makes it more elitist. And then I grew up skiing in Scotland, and now, yes, we're having a fantastic start to this 2026 year. We've already had a huge thaw in the last week, and it's just not a viable opportunity for Scottish kids to train every weekend up at Cairngorm like I used to, just putting in financial barriers, because now you have to go to Europe, or you have to spend a lot of money to go to an academy or somewhere else to train on a regular basis, and it's just not a thing anymore. And to be able to, I guess, totally base yourself at home for a winter and still have a chance against those kids that are in Europe all the time. And that's a really sad sort of point to look at things from. And so to make the changes, I guess we could start taking climate change seriously as a sport and as an industry as a whole.
As someone who loves the outdoors, it's so frustrating that getting to epic places with my gear often means relying on planes or cars, because greener public transport options are limited, disconnected, and definitely not designed with adventure in mind. Take bikes on trains, for example. It can be a total nightmare, as every operator has different rules, every country has different policies, spaces are limited, and UK train prices, need I say more? That's why the Protect Our Winters UK Clean Miles campaign matters. They're calling for public transport that's affordable, reliable, well-connected, and built for adventure, so that we can reach the mountains in a greener, easier way. Transport is one of the biggest drivers of climate change, and we urgently need better options. Head to the link in the pod description now to sign the campaign. And you find amongst, fellow athletes, fellow commentators, that the climate crisis does come up?
I think it does come up, and it's really interesting because I've recently started a role as the athlete alliance manager for Protect Our Winters UK. The number one thing whenever I'm speaking to any athletes, just asking if they'd be interested in joining the Athlete Alliance, is, I mean, I get it, I see it, like, it's a cause I can really get behind, but as an athlete who is on the glacier, who travels by plane to ski, to train, who drives a van, and all of these things, how can I get behind? How can I put my voice out there? How can I speak about it? Because I'm part of the problem. Everyone acknowledges that it's there, but are so scared that it's going to limit the opportunities in our sport. It's going to limit our sports, or it's going to cancel our sports altogether. And for that reason, there's a reluctance, I think, to talk about it. But what I've learned through doing, sort of training, education, carbon literacy training, is that we all have a voice to use. We've got the real lived experience, and we've seen it with our own eyes. So we're a trustworthy source of being able to talk about what's happening with authority, and people will listen to that. And that is what then drives bigger policy change in government to make flying or travelling or whatever it is less carbon heavy, to make sure that ski resorts are running more on greener sources of energy, to make sure our body or our skeleton tracks refrigeration is powered by green sourced energy. That suddenly, again, sort of opens your world up to being like, okay, right, the whole climate crisis isn't down to me. It's actually a universal governmental policy corporate change that needs to happen, and it's not just down to me and you as the ski racers of the world. Yeah, we can make small changes, but most importantly, we can use our voice.
If someone is interested in getting involved with Protect Our Winters across the world or in the UK, what should they do?
They get in touch. We're a really friendly bunch of people, actually. And I think, again, with that reluctance, I think there can be the thought out there that a climate change charity or someone's going to turn around and tell you, okay, you have to be vegan, you have to not fly, you have to get the train everywhere, bicycle, walk, and all of these quite massive lifestyle changes that you can't necessarily make are going to come up. But it's actually yeah, you can maybe make one or two changes, and having the understanding of, oh, actually, if I just car share, that's going to make quite a significant carbon difference. And that's not too difficult to sometimes coordinate with people. Or, yeah, let's actually maybe getting the train to the Alps isn't that expensive as we might think, or isn't as difficult as we might think. So we can have those. We would suggest those as changes rather than overhaul your whole life. We're advocates for mobilising the outdoor community for meaningful action, and that's what the things that we all can do in our day-to-day lives.
And it's cool because it's not just people who ski, for example. It is the entire outdoors community. And I saw a post the other day that said something like, you can still do all these various things. Like, you don't have to be perfect in a climate world.
Yeah.
If you need to fly, you can still fly and advocate for the climate. Some people feel that if they do fly, then they can never advocate or talk about the climate. And what's your response to that?
We call that imperfect advocacy, because the world isn't designed for us to be able to travel or do our sports without outputting a certain amount of carbon or releasing a certain amount of carbon into the environment. And actually, Protect Our Winters was always set up so that we could still do our sports and protect the places where we do our sports. So if you live in Manchester and you're flying out to the Alps for your ski holiday, because that's what you enjoy and that's the thing that you do, yeah, there's actually not really another sensible option around that. And that's what a big part of Protect Our Winter is about at the moment, is trying to make those journeys easier. But if you then get to the other side and you've thought, actually, do you know what, I'm not going to buy a new ski jacket this year because I actually think my last year's one's in really good nick, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to re-waterproof it, and I'll keep using that, and I'm going to maybe I'll rent a new ski jacket for this time because I want something a little bit different. Those are all changes that are still making a huge difference. Yes, you've flown, but there's other things you can still do, and still speaking up, and I guess then, pushing our policymakers to make travel more sustainable in the long run will then even take that quandary out of your day-to-day
Completely.
Yeah.
And I thought, just to finish, we could do a cheeky little quick fire, or as you might say, a cheeky little squeaky bum.
A squeaky bum.
So are you ready?
I'm ready, it's all over me.
Okay, what's your spirit animal?
Okay, I did a project on orcas in school, in primary school. And there's always been a sort of mammal that I've been massively fascinated with, because they sort of look like they're out on their own, and they're out there being tough and fierce, and that's how I obviously like to view myself sometimes, being tough and fierce. But then they all still need their community and their pod to function properly and be happy. And I do like my own space sometimes, and I can be really headstrong and everything, and do spend quite a lot of time then just sort of rushing around on my own. But I still always need my pod of people to give me the best out of everything.
Or Scotland?
Scotland, obviously.
Your party trick?
My party trick. It might not happen at a party, but I can jump on and off a slackline, which took me quite a long time to jump up, walk along, walk backwards, lunge down, lunge back. I got quite good at slacklining for a certain point of my career. So if there's ever one at a barbecue, I'll be on that.
That's so cool. And just lastly, what is the piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
It's know yourself, know who you are, and that's all you actually need. And as long as you stay true to that, everything else that happens will be easy, and you'll be quite the character, and it'll be quite a force for anyone to ever have to push around. And I think things will come easier to you.
Charlie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You've been a brilliant guest, and we can't wait to hear you and all your commentary at the upcoming Olympics.
Thank you very much for having me.
My word, unbelievable. I mean, when you think about what Charlie has gone through, those injury cycles, and she's managed to come back and win that European Cup off the back of that, and you know how crazy that it can just be saying yes to one phone call can change your life in so many ways. And her mindset, her resilience, I think that is endlessly inspiring. And I think sometimes the transition from athlete to a commentator, or maybe even to the next stage of your life, can be really difficult. And a lot of athletes have spoken about that, the struggle. You go from a really regimented routine life to then, well, what do I do now? Who am I? What is my identity without the sport? And it's incredible the way that Charlie has managed to carve out such a balanced mindset, doing that psychology degree, but also sharing her incredible analysis through commentary. And we are so excited to see her absolutely smash it in the commentary box at the Olympics. And Charlie also mentioned, I think, a lot of really important topics about climate change and how it impacts snow sports. And I would echo those thoughts from her about the imperfect climate advocate. I am literally that person. I live in Malta. And for me to get to some of my work in London, it means I have to fly. And I think sometimes you can shy away from being a climate activist because you kind of feel like, well, should I because I fly? And I definitely fight with that quite a lot. But I think that's what's really important about Protect Our Winters messaging, is that it is more than that. Whether you're imperfect or perfect, you know, using your voice for good is still really, really important. So I really urge you to go and sign that Clean Miles petition that I've been talking about. That is in the description. But more than that, go and sign up to Protect Our Winters. You follow them on Instagram. Their posts are inspiring and they're an amazing team, so I really, really, really recommend it. And as always, make sure you follow, subscribe, share the Passion Stories podcast so you are in the know when the next incredible guest drops, because we have some amazing ones lined up. We have a couple more for the Winter Sports Series, and it is just so cool with the Olympics and Paralympics just so close to being on our screens. How mega and how exciting. I've been Emma Cole. It is always my pleasure to bring you the Passion Stories podcast. Thanks to Tune Tank for the tunes.